So we've got a question coming in that says, "Were the gulags an accident?"
There were prison camps in the Soviet Union, and they were awful. And from by all accounts, even the most sympathetic accounts to the Soviet Union, there were a lot of people who didn't belong in those prison camps who were there, and that's awful. And authoritarianism in any society, and this is a very important thing. Authoritarianism in any society is directly proportional to the level of development. If a country is very, very poor and unstable, you're going to have a very, very authoritarian government. However, if a country is prosperous and developed and stable as a society, you're going to have more openness and more freedom. And that's how these things work. And that, if you want to get rid of things like gulags, if the Soviet Union had been allowed to develop and build itself up and become more prosperous without the threat of nuclear war hanging over their head, without the constant invasion and attacks on them, I believe it would have been a much more open society and free society than it was. But again, we like to moralize this, and this is one thing we hear a lot in Joe Biden's speeches. He makes it sound like there are good countries that have freedom, and then there's bad countries that don't have freedom. Well, no one on the planet Earth was ever talking about human rights or the rights of man until like the 1400s in Europe. And why is that? Were people just bad and evil until John Locke was born? Of course not. But there had not yet been a society that had developed economically to the point to lay the basis for those kind of rights. Try running, a society on the level of development you had in medieval Europe, a barely subsisting agrarian economy with absolute freedom, where everyone can believe whatever they want, can say whatever they want, where you're electing people. It wouldn't work, right? That poverty necessitates authoritarianism. Instability and war necessitates authoritarianism. But prosperity, development, and openness tends to lead to societies that are much more free. Ultimately, the goal is a society with no state at all, with no coercion at all, some kind of luxury, futuristic society where people only work because they feel like working, where there's no state repression. But the basis of that is raising the productive forces, raising people out of poverty.
So, there's an interesting sort of nugget in there, and this is the necessitates authoritarianism. And so I might just ask, so then who determines who, like, how do you, I guess, decide on an authoritarian structure? So let's say the goal is, let's say, to become a fully socialized or even communist economy. But in order to get there, you have to go through this middle step, which involves heavy-handed authoritarianism. How do
No,
Okay.
I don't think we would have to do that here in the United States because we already have a high level of development. The
Right.
reason that the Soviet Union became a very authoritarian country is because right after the Russian Revolution, 15 different countries invaded them, and they faced an economic blockade, and they were fighting for their lives, and they were under attack and under blockade, and that's when they developed authoritarianism. Originally there were three political parties in the Soviet Union. There was the Bolshevik Party, the left Menshevik Party, and the left Socialist Revolutionary Party. But then, over the course of the Civil War, you had, attempts to assassinate Lenin. You had, a civil war in which millions of people were dying, and they outlawed those two other parties. And then later, Lenin came forward and outlawed factions within the Bolshevik Party and said, if we're gonna pull through this, we can't even have factions within our own party. And that the authoritarianism, that we associate with Stalin and other things, that developed as a result of the real conditions they were in. It developed as the result of the attacks they were facing, of what they had to do to overcome the conditions that they were in. Any society in those conditions is going to become authoritarian. That's not what I want, and I would never want to advocate that. My hope is that through the democratic process, we here in the United States could vote for a socialist program, public control of banking, public control of our natural resources, and gradually transition that way. And that, the rich and powerful would follow the law and respect democracy and let us to transition toward a working class government in the United States. And that working class government would be able to respect everyone's democratic rights, and that we could move towards socialism in a peaceful and democratic manner. That's what I would prefer. I am not an advocate of authoritarianism. When authoritarianism has developed, it's a result of hostile conditions, and it's not a good thing. I don't think anyone thinks that gulags are a good thing. I don't think anyone thinks that having a secret police monitoring everyone is a good thing. But these things happen, and let's not pretend they don't happen here also. Okay, we know about COINTELPRO, and how the FBI viciously went after the Black Panthers and murdered Fred Hampton, gunned him down in his bed when he was sleeping. We know what was done to the labor movement, and how just to get things like the minimum wage, many Americans died. We know about these things, read about the sweatshops, that existed. American capitalism has very much built itself up on a layer of corpses and bones, the corpses of the Native Americans, the corpses of the African Americans and the transatlantic slave trade, millions killed in Vietnam, millions killed in Korea. So there's plenty of blood on the hands of the American capitalist system. Let's be clear about that. But yes, we do enjoy more civil liberties in our everyday lives in the United States than people enjoyed in the Soviet Union or enjoy today in China. And that's not a good thing for the former Soviet Union. That's not a good thing for China. And I would hope that those societies can move in a direction of having better human rights. And I hope that we can be better about human rights in our society, and we can transition to socialism in the United States in a way that would lead to more democratic openness.